So George Russell at the front of the field, brilliant getaway. I was then immediately panicking because now Max Verstappen is close to my boys, and we both know what Verstappen can be like.
Right, here we go.
We're gonna right. This is probably gonna be one of the two big talking points of the night. I feel like the other one we might agree with a little bit more on, but this one I feel like we're not going to see eye to eye, are we?
We are reasonable.
We are reasonable.
The name of the podcast comes from that.
Exactly. But let's not try and hide any facts away for a second, Jamie. You are a Max Verstappen fan.
Yes.
I am a Lewis Hamilton fan. We're not going to try and deny these allegations. Now, the way... Again, this is the horrible thing as well, of course, with incidents like this, because you see pictures on Twitter. We can agree here, pictures are the worst sense of evidence in Formula 1, because they give you no context to what is going on. In most sports, you're absolutely right.
Because football, people always pause when someone's two-footing someone, but they pause it on the instant they get the ball.
Yeah.
And they forget to include where they broke their leg.
Yeah, 3 seconds beforehand.
Yeah.
Now, the way I see it, Verstappen tries to get the run around the outside of Hamilton. He gets into turn 1 ahead. I completely agree. Mm-hmm. But he's pretty much fully behind, because he's taken so much speed into turn 1. As they head down into turn 2, he's actually got his front wheels alongside Hamilton's rear wheels.
Yeah.
At that point, Max Verstappen should have backed out, because it's no longer his corner at turn 2. What, of course, he actually does is tries to get the car to the apex as quickly as possible to try and make it his corner. Now, there's a lot more, obviously, to this incident, of course, that I feel like a lot of people forget almost because, let's be fair, there's a much bigger picture between Hamilton and Verstappen. Because they haven't really fought this year, it's kind of been forgotten about. But there is an almighty grudge match going on behind the scenes between these two.
Yeah, they do not get on.
Because what's basically happened, of course, over the last few years is Verstappen has gone in with a similar mentality to what Ayrton Senna used to do, which was he will put the car in a position where it's up to you to decide whether you're having a crash or not.
Yeah.
Now, that means that pretty much every other driver on the grid will back out in that situation, doesn't it? Lewis did that at the start of last year, at Imola and Spain most notably, and then kind of realised, why on earth should I do this anymore? Because he's just going to do it every time. So since then, whether it's made sense or not for Lewis, he's basically known he cannot back out with Max because Max will simply never do it for him. Is that all fair?
I think so. Yeah, I think...
Because
sometimes, obviously, the big one was Silverstone, where, like...
Yeah, the two big ones were Silverstone and Monza, weren't they, really?
Yeah, where, like, either driver could have avoided it, but because one driver was going for the move, it was probably slightly more on them.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Now, again, of course, I think a lot of people kind of forget about this, but there is so much psychology behind racing drivers, of course. When they're acting on instinct and things like that, a lot of it has got to be automatic. They've got to retrain their brains in these situations.
And you have to believe that you're better than the other driver. I remember I heard something from David Coulthard, like, back when he was teammates with Hakkinen. He, going into like 2001 even, he genuinely had to convince himself, and did convince himself, that he can
still
be
the number one.
Hakkinen.
Yeah,
because if you're going in without that mentality, you're just going to get trounced.
There's no point being there. If you don't believe you're the best, there's no point being there at Formula 1 at the end of the day. Now, again, obviously, we haven't seen this much this year between Lewis and Max, but Lewis knows full well, going into turn 2, he has to close that door on Verstappen.
Yeah.
Obviously, Verstappen has come out after the Grand Prix saying that he just put the car there. It didn't matter for him. It cost him 5 seconds, which is not true because he had to pit. But it cost Hamilton a race victory. This is something, of course, that Verstappen did last year at Monza as well, because he knew that the Merc was faster that weekend. Sometimes he still will put his car in a situation where he knows there's going to be a crash unless the other driver backs out. With most drivers, that's going to work. Hamilton knows full well every time they are in a wheel-to-wheel battle, whether it's this year, last year, in the future, any potential championship fight they're going to have again, they are going to keep colliding.
Yeah.
Until
one
this
of
is
them backs down, which I don't
which
think will happen.
neither of them can anymore. This is the problem I think that a lot of people have got to understand. Neither of those two drivers, if they're going wheel-to-wheel into a corner anymore, can back out. Unless you got other circumstances where one of them's got a big championship lead or something like this, which again you'd then believe Max Verstappen would back out of it, but of course the title's wrapped up. From his side of things, he's thinking, I don't care.
Yeah, I've already won it. Who cares?
Yeah, it's really, really difficult, but at the end of the day, it's kind of that weird thing, isn't it? Of that won't be the last time they crash. But apart from just giving them normal penalties, you can't really do anything about it either.
No, it's almost bigger than the stewards, their feud, because like all the stewards do is take an incident at surface level and give an appropriate
They
penalty.
can't base it on driver psychology or anything like that. And this is the thing at the end of the day, because again, the only drivers that refused to back out with Senna were the likes of Alain Prost, who obviously was able to keep battling with him for championships. Every other driver pretty much is pushed to the side in those situations. And
this is why I really want another Hamilton-Verstappen title battle, just because it'd be good crack, really.
It would be absolutely insane, again. I'm not sure how well I'd be able to cope with it, my poor heart. But it's kind of that thing, isn't it, of it's fantastic sport up to a certain point. But sometimes you just want to go to both of them. It's almost like you need the FIA to really come down hard at some point.
Together, really, and say, stop.
This is, it's kind of got to be that thing of, say, for example, let's say next year we end up in another situation like 2021, where they're in an all-out championship scrap. Say 6 races from the end of in some hypothetical words, 6 races from the end of the year, Hamilton and Verstappen do that again at Brazil. Whoever you appoint the blame to, you want to say, if you two come together like that, you're out of the championship. We are not having you two constantly doing this over and over and over. Whether it'll actually make a difference or not is a very different question.
And also,
but there is so much at play between these two.
They wouldn't do that.
They wouldn't do that, no, absolutely. But it's the only ever way they can put a stop to this. Because it will just happen every single time.
I don't know if they want to put a stop to it. It causes so many moments that people talk about. It's like they just want to let the world burn.
It's kind of that difficult thing, isn't it? Because again, a lot of people go, oh, well, Verstappen has been able to race cleanly with everyone else this year. It's quite clear who's the problem. Everyone else backs out. Hamilton has been able to race cleanly, with the exception of the incident with Alonso. Hamilton's been able to race cleanly.
They have beef as well.
They have beef. But again, we look back at brilliant battles last year. One of the best battles of last season was Alonso and Hamilton at Hungary.
Yeah.
It was Hamilton misjudged it at Belgium. We can completely admit that. Even as a Hamilton fan, I'd say he messed up. He made a mistake. 300 races in, it's bound to happen from time to time.
His first mistake, yeah.
Exactly. But the older drivers, again, Formula One reposted this clip earlier on in the week, didn't they, of Kimi and Schumacher battling at Brazil. We have got ourselves into an issue now in Formula One, and I know we've spoken about this before countless times, where we won't get battles like that anymore because that's not what the drivers are brought up and shown to do anymore.
No,
we are going to get more incidents and more crashes.
Didn't come down hard on Verstappen in 2015.
Yeah, exactly. It all stemmed from there. When you had all the other drivers that are now coming into Formula One that were in F3 or F4 or GP2 at the time,
watching Verstappen rinse the midfield by doing moves like that.
Exactly.
Which were very exciting because before that F1 hadn't seen anything like it before.
Because there was a lot more respect.
Yeah, that's all we get. And when you have one driver out of 19 doing it, it's quite entertaining.
But soon enough, it's going to be
out of 20.
Yeah, most of them.
It's like suddenly you're just having crashes that could be avoided.
Yeah.
But shall we get back onto the topic, because I feel like I've not said a word about the actual incident.
Well, you were agreeing with me.
You're basically right, unfortunately.
As always, knowing real, mate.
I do think, yeah, both of them could have avoided it, but because Verstappen was going for the move, it's kind of his responsibility to not crash.
Yes.
But yeah, neither was obviously going to back out. It was unfortunate. Verstappen, I think the penalty is a little harsh, but it was always going to happen.
It needed to be done, didn't it?
Yeah.
And I think this is of course, Verstappen's come out afterwards saying that it didn't really matter for him and it did for Lewis. That especially obviously with everything else that went on that Grand Prix, it was quite clear that Verstappen knew he'd probably made a bit of a cock up in that moment, and probably he knows. The thing is, again, of course, he knows that wasn't the right thing to do, but you cannot admit that either.
No.
Because obviously
he's not going to go and say, "Oh, I made a mistake. Sorry, Lewis."
Exactly. This is just the weirdly toxic kind of spiral this has turned into, and it just won't ever probably get better. And I mean, obviously, Hamilton said after the race as well, of course, he knows what Max is like. It's going to keep happening, but we've just kind of got to happen. It doesn't happen too much.
I want 2023 to be an absolute mess.
It could be an absolute spice fest again, but it is certainly a dangerous sort of preface, isn't it? Because again, of course,
if we get one more season of them two going for a title, this will be a defining era of Formula One. Like, it arguably already is, but I think if you get one more, it will be like a Senna-Prost level rivalry.
I think it already is.
I think only having one proper championship season like that, it's a bit like...
I think the problem is as well, of course, was the way it was tarnished last year.
Yeah.
Because, of course, when Senna and Prost came to blows a couple of times, that was all on themselves.
Apart from the FA handing Prost the championship. But
yeah.
Yeah.
But, like, the actual collisions came from themselves. But again, I think this is the horrible thing as well, of course. You know, for me, this obviously watched Hamilton since he came to the sport 15 years ago. You know, he doesn't race anyone else like that. But people only remember these battles now, don't they? Because again, you know, we always remember the crashes or the incidents, things like that. Hamilton, with pretty much any other driver on the grid, is generally pretty... I'd argue he's still in that group of 4 or 5 drivers that is pretty respectful still. He'll push you, but he won't push you over the limit. He has to with Max.
With Rosberg.
I wouldn't even say with Rosberg there was any particularly moments like this.
There weren't moments like that, but that's because Rosberg just got pushed around until he just stopped getting pushed around.
You mean stopped racing in Formula 1? But I wouldn't even say it was... It was nothing... It was never really like that, though, was it? Particularly because even in the instance they had...
There were 3 in a row in 2015 where every time Hamilton just pushed him off at turn 1.
Yeah.
And he knew what he was doing, and it was just not really on, but he got away with it.
But they weren't massive contact or anything.
No, Hamilton just ushered him over the white line into some grass or gravel.
It wasn't grass or gravel, was it?
At Japan it was. USA just forced him
USA just forced him wide. Japan I don't actually genuinely remember, to be honest.
Rosberg on pole, Hamilton second.
Was it at turn 2? Yes, at turn 2. I do remember that. Sorry, yeah. And the third one?
Yeah. There was one, whatever race was before Japan. It was 3 races in a row at the end of 2015. Potentially Russia. I can't remember which race it was. But yeah.
Okay.
It's in the past.
Yeah. Right, anyway, that's our big sort of... Because, I mean, this was probably one of the big talking points of the race and sort of bigger picture as well, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Kind of navigate